Okay, so go grab these parts and let's start assembling the chassis. So these these nitrile O-rings make really great feet. Have a little bit of spring to them, and they make sure that the actual preamp stays put. So if you put it on any kind of a regular smooth surface,
it's not going anywhere.
No, in fact, you actually have to physically lift it. Now, this is a black color, and cameras don't like black because there's not a lot of contrast. So just work the O-ring into the groove, and then just have a look to see if you've got it. See how I've got a little bump there? Just find that last little bit and work it in until you got it on.
It's a fairly snug.
This is fun. So, yeah, it's a good snug fit. Once they're in, though, they tend to stay put. So after you get it all worked in, you've got 4 corners, and
don't put them on the outside ones. You want to put them on the inside ones.
Oh, thanks, Charles. I was just about to do that. And I'll show you something I like to do on my bench. I like to keep bits that are actually free of the screwdriver or a power driver. And I find that it's really easy to over torque. So if you use something like this, I'll show you. So
you need your 4 M3x12s.
Truss heads. So I'm going to put them right like this. Each corner is the same.
Make sure you have the label facing downwards. And then you just want to get it started.
Yeah.
The feet are already threaded, so it should take the M3 thread just fine. And you can see it goes on great.
Now I'll show you how I like to tighten down. Now all of the threading on all of these 3D parts it's all done in plastic, so it only has so much strength. So you do not want to over torque. So by taking a bit like this in your fingers, you can control your torque much better than a big heavy screwdriver or a power driver. So just snug it on, and that's it. Bob's your uncle. And you got 3 more to put on, and we'll see you back in a second. Okay, so this is what your bottom should look like. Your label's on the same side as the feet, and let's get going with the actual the sides and the front and back. Okay, so go ahead and grab 16 of your
16 millimeter M3 hex truss heads, and that's these guys that are right here.
And all of your M3 square nuts. You're going to need a metric M2 hex driver. I like these long bits because, again, I'll handle them by hand. And grab your sides and your front and back. Now, there's going to be some very minor manufacturing defects, so just choose whatever side is the best for out. And
be sure to work on a soft surface too, so you don't mark things up. These are very resilient, but it's always a good idea to not add more scratches and marks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to show you how to do one corner. There's really nothing to it. So just get your screw on, drop your nut in. It's harder to show than it is actually to do. I get a finger onto the nut, and I get my driver on, and then I just wait until I get a connection. So if you're not connecting up right away to your nut, you're not making good thread contact, you can go backwards a little bit, and that will help line everything up. And then you go forwards once you get everything straightened away. So just put it on loose. Do one more. And it's basically the same thing. I'm going to drop the nut onto it. It's almost captured. It's just a matter of getting the threads to start, and then Bob's your uncle. Okay, so I've got that on loose. Now I'm going to do the other side here, the other corner, and then we'll do the other side, and we'll meet you back, and then we'll start putting the whole of the casework together. Okay, so I've got one side assembled. Now, notice how it's assembled loosely. We've done that deliberately so that we can line everything up before we tighten it up. So what you want to do is push the corner block and the side panel like this. So you want it nice and snug, and at the same time you want to make sure that your top and bottom are nice and flush. So just put your fingers here to feel and push at the same time. And now just take your bit and just snug it down and just check. And that looks really good, so I'm going to snug it a little bit more. And when the whole case is together, we'll maybe make a little tiny bit more of a torque. Do the same thing on the other corner, and then we'll be assembling the chassis. Okay, so let's go and put on the front panel. Now it can go, this is the front face, and this is the inside face. So it's dead easy. It's exactly the same as what we did on the sides.
And it doesn't matter which orientation you put it in right now, as long as the front face is facing outward.
That's right. So we could flip it over like this, and it'll work just perfectly. Okay, I think you know what you're doing. We'll see you back in a minute. Okay, so it's time to put the back on. Now we've got to start thinking about orientation. So there's a lovely little printed gold dial, and there's an opening, and that's the bottom, right? That faces down. So this is the top of our chassis, and that means that the back goes on like this, right, with the label up. And this is exactly the same way that we've been doing every corner.
So we'll see you back here in just a second, and then we'll get everything aligned and snugged down.
Yeah, and like all of the connections, we initially just put it on lightly so that we can make adjustments. Okay, now that we've got the basics of the chassis assembled, we're going to want to line up and tighten up each one of these corners. And you may have noticed that you've got one nut left. Now, in your hardware and wire list, and actually let's just go and grab it from our build manual. Okay, so here's the hardware and wire list that's in your build manual. And whenever you see an item like, here's the M3 square nuts right here. Notice how we've marked 16 plus 1. What that plus 1 is an extra component that's in the kit. You shouldn't need it, but for components that are critical or small, that are easy to lose, or that are easy to mess up, we always put extra parts in to make sure that you can keep building. Okay, so enough paperwork. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're flush on the top and flush on the bottom. So if you're on a smooth tabletop, that's pretty much the best. And now make sure you're snug together. So you want to make sure you're pulled together like this, and you're just going to snug it down. You can do the same on this corner as well. And then we can flip it over, and we can check, and we're just a little proud. So I'm actually going to loosen it off, and I'm not loosening it off all the way. I'm just loosening it off a little tiny bit so that I can get it centered. And now you see why we're just adjusting things carefully, bit by bit. And this corner, and you can go ahead and do the front. I think you know what you're doing now, but that's how it's all going to look like when it's all finished. Okay, so go ahead and grab the two machine screws. They're black flathead M3 by 8s and a couple of nylocks. The nylocks are really cool. What they are is a self-locking nut. So inside the nut, there is a nylon insert. That's where they get their name. They're called nylocks. And what that does is it locks the machine screw down, yeah.
Well, it stops it from backing out on its own.
Yeah, and they're used a lot in aviation, but they're used, pretty much anywhere and everywhere where you don't want a screw backing out on you. And the nice thing is you can disassemble them if you need to. They're just in a little bit snug. And grab your IEC. You can see the IEC is keyed, and it's actually the terminals are labeled. We don't need to worry about the labels right now. And there's only one way that this can go in because the chassis is keyed as well. So what I like to do with these is I just load the machine screw like this onto my bit, and I just grab that nut and I just get it on loosely. Now, as you're working on your chassis parts, your PCB, all your components, you're going to be getting a little bit of grease on them, a little dirt. Don't fuss about it while you're building. Just be careful to work on a soft surface. And when we're all done building, then we'll come in with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, a nice soft cloth, and we'll just clean everything up. And let's go and grab a nut driver, and I'll meet you back in a second. Okay, so a 7/32 socket or a 5.5 mil socket is what you need. Now, notice I haven't put a wrench on here. I've just put a little extender bar because I don't want to over torque.
It's a little more forgiving with the metal hardware than the 3D printed parts, but you still don't want to go too hard.
So just snug it down. Remember that you're probably stronger than an M3 fastener and you can break things. So don't do that. It was one of my first lessons when I was learning how to work on cars many, many decades ago, and I was lucky enough to have a master mechanic show me how to use the right tool for the right torque, basically, to help control your strength. Now, I work a lot with my hands, so they're still fairly strong, so I've got to be very careful I don't over-torque things. And that's what it looks like when it's installed. And yeah. Okay, so the very last thing to do is to snug everything down just a little bit. And so for that, I'm actually going to load my M2 hex bit into the screwdriver, so I have a little bit more torque. And just go around to each one of your corners. You've already lined everything up and it's all snugged down. So now you're just going to apply just a little bit of final torque. Don't overdo it, okay? Just, you'll feel as it snugs down, you're done. It's much better to err on the side of slightly loose than too hard and you've broken something. So, okay, so just go around. You've got 16 of these to do. And then the chassis is mostly assembled. Well done, everyone.